Joining me now is Batya Ungar-Sargon, opinion editor at Newsweek. Batya, thanks so much for coming on the U.S. Report this week. And I got to ask you, what are your thoughts on Trump's historic indictment number 2 this week?
I got to tell you, what I'm hearing from people, especially working class people, is just a very big shrug. People didn't vote for Trump because they thought that he was good at getting the plaudits of the ghouls on MSNBC. They voted for Trump because he was the first politician in a generation to actually stand up to the elites of both sides and tell the working class, I see you and I see your struggle. And that remains the case. He's the only person making people feel like their struggle to achieve the American dream is seen. And so this is just kind of what they're going to change their minds over a bunch of documents. It's not going to happen.
Well, tell me more about then this sort of struggle that people are going through right now, and how are other politicians at all trying to connect to this? I want to ask specifically about Ron DeSantis, who is Trump's #1 rival right now. Is he connecting? Is he making at all a pitch for that group of voters who has been left behind essentially for the last 10, 20 or more years? Or is he sort of falling into some of the trap that some people say that he's becoming too much of a corporate Republican?
I gotta tell you, the fight against wokeness is the virtue signal of the right. It's true. Working class people, they're not into the wokeness and they hate having it shoved down their throats, but they have real struggles. These are people who work so hard to achieve the American dream and feel that it is out of reach. That is their #1 concern. And when I look at DeSantis, he seems very caught up in this fight against wokeness, which at the end of the day is taking on the elites of the left. But it doesn't seem that he's quite ready to take on the elites of the right, especially the free market, trade, open borders right, the Chamber of Commerce right that ruled the Republican Party for so long.
And, you mentioned open borders, trade, all of that. And let's talk about borders, because I think that this is something that's going to wind up coming back around and biting the Democrats to some extent. We're seeing this more and more in these sanctuary cities. Texas governor has just bussed a bunch of migrants to Los Angeles. In L.A., New York, Chicago, we're seeing footage every week of migrants, with no place to go, camping out in fire stations elsewhere. Will this wind up having some blowback on the Democrat vote? And I'm thinking about specifically about states like New York, where the city always goes Republican, but Democrat, but the rest of the state, it's a big state, goes Republican. Is there a chance that this might have some national effect this time around?
The display of just blatant hypocrisy from these progressive leftists who call themselves sanctuary city and virtue signaled up the wazoo when Trump was in office and actually controlling the border, now turning around and saying, oh, actually, we didn't mean immigrants are welcome here. We meant immigrants are welcome there, where Republican working class people live, right? That blatant hypocrisy is so clearly on display. And you're definitely seeing changing in polling among Democrats when it comes to the question of immigration. This is just unsustainable. And I think that it's really been Biden, a presidency with many, many failures. The opening of the border to allow in 2 million undocumented immigrants and then just paroling them throughout the country, that has to be his signature failure. And that is going to be an albatross around his neck in 2024.
Well, I tell you what, Batya, borders have brought down governments in Australia. We may wind up seeing something like that in the U.S. But, back to this sort of day-to-day life thing that I think is, you correctly belled the cat on. President Biden this week vetoed a resolution that would have repealed new limits on heavy-duty vehicles and emissions that the Biden administration is pushing. At the same time, the Republicans have also just pushed through a move to overturn the Biden administration's push against gas stoves. So is this really where so much of the fight is going to happen now, in people's kitchens and in their driveways?
I got to tell you something funny. There's a new poll that came out that was done by Jacobin and YouGov, and the question was, how do the Democrats woo back the white working class so they can pass their Democratic agenda? And it really begged the question, what is that democratic agenda outside of the needs of the working class, right? And you just pointed it out. It's their climate extremism. They want to woo back the working class so they can use their votes to pass this stuff that hurts the working class, which is never going to happen because they're not going to vote against their economic interests. This environmental extremism is just a tax on the working class. Who drives big trucks? Who drives tractors? Who needs equipment on their farms, right? As opposed to who can buy a Tesla, right? Which takes 2 hours to charge up and gets you 50 miles, right? This is about the class divide, as always, and the Democrats are on the wrong side of it.
Well, not just class is a big issue in America, Batya, but also race. And I was fascinated by this story here, where a jury on Monday found in favor of a former Starbucks regional director, Shannon Phillips. Now, she sued the company for wrongfully firing her, claiming that she was terminated for being white after a racist incident at a Starbucks in, I think, Philadelphia. Tell us about this, and are the courts now starting to correct some of the excesses of racial wokeness that we've seen in the last few years, particularly after George Floyd?
Yeah, we're definitely in the woke clash. I think for a long time, people like me who were looking at the polling and saying, look, America is not a racist country anymore. Look, the burden of proof was on us to prove that, given our history. But I think that we have proven that. And as a result, all of this hysteria around racial issues has really started to ring hollow, thank God. And so I think we are very much in the woke clash. You're seeing it on the racial front and on the trans front as well.
Batya Ungar-Sargon, thank you so much. You can read her in Newsweek magazine. Thank you so much for appearing with us tonight.
Thanks for having me. Such a pleasure.